6 o'clock, February the 10th, 2020. We'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So we have some feedback back from the Board of Selectmen on some of our changes. I guess we'll just go through them one by one and open the floor for discussion and see if we'll make any amendments. So the first one was for Selectman Knickerbocker made a motion, which was seconded by Selectman Straighten, to request the Charter Revision Commission to reconsider, remove the advisory question completely, number 8, add just right to non-binding advisory question.
Nick?
Yep.
I put it in a memo form on the back of your agendas.
Oh,
so
even
just
better.
So that you
Okay.
have it.
Perfect.
I have something about that. So,
No,
as we've,
thank you.
as I've said, and a couple of us here who've worked at the polls quite a bit over the years have said that the too high and too low has always been confusing. I mean, and not just once in a while, but constantly. But I don't know whether to put too high or too low. People get confused, frustrated with it. So I think, in view of that, if we're not gonna add the too high, too low, unless some departments absolutely feel they can't function and make good judgments without the too high, too low, I think we should take the whole thing out.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Well, we weren't taking it out, we were adding to it.
No, but the selectmen had suggested taking
Yeah,
it
take out the
out.
third option.
And I'm
Mr. Chair,
saying-
when appropriate, after the comments, I'll clarify that if you'd like.
And I'm not familiar, has
Isn't that
anyone
me?
on this board been on the finance committee?
Mhm.
Do they find this question useful?
Depends on
I mean,
who you
that's the whole
have.
reason for it, so.
Right, that's what I'm not sure of. How useful is that?
So you at the poll saying it's very confusing, not useful,
Right,
but are you using it?
yeah, that's what I don't know.
Nick?
Yeah.
If I might, oh, I'm sorry, go
No, no,
ahead.
well,
Mhm.
the only thing I can tell you is that I have been the recording secretary for the Board of Finance for, I think, about 5 years now, 5 or
Mhm.
6 that I've done, and it's never been a topic.
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
all I can tell you.
Okay.
If I might add?
Sure,
uh,
absolutely, yeah, please.
With all due respect to those who worked on this, and I know that there are some handful of voters who come in and say, well, I wish there was a just right. We feel very strongly that this is, first, it's a question that provides no feedback, because I went back 20 years in the records. 20 years, I could not find a single instance where these questions provided any useful feedback or guidance to the Board of Finance. When the budget passed easily, but by hundreds of vote margin, it was always too high. When it failed by narrowly, it was too high. When it failed by a lot, it was too high. That margin never changed. Point number 2, there's a significant number of people who don't bother to answer it at all. Point number 3, there are ballots that are rejected, and I don't know how many, but there are ballots that are rejected due to confusion because people don't understand how they think erroneously that the question relates to the yes or the no. Sometimes in audits they found ballots that the yes or the no wasn't checked at all. They just checked too high. So
Yeah.
does that mean yes or no? And one of the things that I find remarkable is that when I listen to the discussions and the feedback from people in the audience, to give you input, give you guidance on this, this goes back more than 20 years to a single instance in which a superintendent of schools at that time said, it was probably one of those years when there were multiple budget failures, when the superintendent said, well, I don't know which way to go on this. Because there was probably at that time when there was one budget vote instead of 2, when it was, before it was bifurcated, that there may have been some guidance needed, but this didn't do it. It has never worked, it has never provided the guidance. in the 10 years I spent on the Board of Ed, and the 10 years I've spent as first selectman and as member of the Board of Selectmen, to echo Mrs. Craig's comments, I have never seen the Board of Finance use that as guidance for the budget. They'll listen to people at the town meeting, they'll listen to people at the public hearing, and I really think that that's a more reliable way to go anyway. So to avoid the confusion, and again, there are instances in just the past few years when if we didn't have those questions on the ballot, we could have provided the voters with more choices, that they could speak with their actual vote, like whether it's a turf field or fire truck or something, but to try to keep the ballot simple. So we respectfully request that that your recommendation be changed to just remove those from the charter.
So
Now-
remove the advisory request. and-
Remove, yeah, which was our
Altogether.
original request, and I'm not sure that,
Yeah, no, it reads that, I just didn't,
Yeah.
emphasize that.
Now, however, removing it from the charter doesn't prevent the Board of Selectmen from putting it on an ad hoc basis. I mean, if we felt that it was a useful question in a given circumstance, it could always be added, but to have it a requirement, we think is confusing, and we'd like to see that go. So that we offer that for your consideration.
I'm sorry, can I say something? I can't believe that more people are confused than more people that think it's their right to be able to speak their mind. I've said many times I vote yes for a budget, but I write too high.
Yeah.
And but we're asking the voter to give as much information as possible. I can't believe that it's more confusing to the voter that wants to go vote for a budget, yes or no, that an advisory question is more confusing than more helpful to the Board of Finance or whoever to be able to speak their mind and say, I think this is too high or too low.
My answer to that would be, those of us, and I include myself in this, who are kind of, I'll call us government insiders, for better or for worse, you would be shocked at how much people can misunderstand that. Some people actually think that if they use that question, some people really don't even understand the word advisory. They think it's going to change the number.
And they think it's a vote somehow.
Yeah, they do. They think it's a vote. It is, there's no other place. I'm trying to think of, municipal, state, federal. There is no other place where there is any such advisory question at all. And I think we have to end the confusion. I think that the voters speak well enough with their vote, and with their voices when they come to meetings. And also keep in mind that, I can't think what the percentage is, the percentage that don't bother answering it, so.
But that's okay too, because not everybody votes for a police commissioner on the second page of a ballot. I mean,
Yeah.
people have the right to either vote for all of it or any of it,
Of course.
But wouldn't it be less confusing now having that third option, just right? Maybe
I
that's why
think that was
people
our original
don't.
thought was,
Right.
let's throw all the spaghetti
Maybe
against
people
the
don't
wall.
answer because they don't feel it's too low or too high, but just right by adding that. I'm more for as much information as possible.
But to that
But if it's
point,
being confused, I'm not sure, but by adding that third, if there were 3 on there right now, where we're saying it's still confusing, I would say take it off. But at this point, I'm saying, put the third on there, so let's see if that alleviates some of the confusion.
I wish there was a way that we could test that before we encode
Right.
it in the charter. Because once it's in the charter,
It's,
I mean, look at the dynamic. It's been in the charter for a lot of years, and with all due respect, people don't like change. They don't want to change it, even if it's not providing information. I would even ask that you not even decide this tonight. Talk on your own, or if you want to call them into a meeting, ask some Board of Finance members, is this meaningful? Does this give you actual feedback that you find useful? And let them tell you if
I
it
mean, I
works.
can say, I don't think it's ever come up once in a Board of Ed budget.
But that's
No,
good.
It's not something, and it oversimplifies an incredibly complex
Yes,
budget.
that is
And when you
correct.
say no, too high, to which part? You know, we've got 5 schools. You know, we've got several different priorities that we're trying to fund, and we're gonna
Yeah,
articulate.
but the voter's
these
not
next week.
voting on one school, the voting is voting on the bottom line for the Board of Ed, so I don't know that that's.
But we have to take that out of very specific parts of the budget. Like, we just don't go, all right, we'll take out.
Well, but that's the good thing of the Board of Ed,
$200,000.
you guys decide where you think you could painfully take it out of a budget. But I think the voters should get the right to say, it's too high.
But that's why I say it oversimplifies it, because we just held all our budget hearings. 0 people showed up. 0 input from the public. So for them to come now and say, too low, too high, okay, so where were you when we're going line by line, saying, this is what we need for ELL learners, this is what we need for
Okay, that's
math
fair.
stuff, this is what we need for social and emotional learning, so,
But I think that's too
What do
deep
we
of a
cut?
dive for the average taxpayer, that you all saying they get confused and don't know what advisory means, to start figuring out what the math line is.
but that's what I'm saying is, so, but those are the decisions we have to make. So with such a simplified question, how does that really inform that decision with any
Well,
data?
but people
Just
vote with
because
their
they-
pocket. If they can't afford it, they have to vote no, because they have to decide, do we pay the taxes and mortgage and live in Bethel, or do we say, we can't spend anymore, and no, it's too high?
But if they think
That's how
it's too
people
high-
vote.
If they think it's too high, whether they have a box to check or not, they're gonna vote no.
Well, except
Well, no, that's not,
Except
Yeah.
that, you know, like I said, even when the previous budgets have passed by wide margins, easily, not a close call, it always says too high, so what's the feedback? What does that mean?
Let me
It-
ask you this.
You know, I don't know.
And you went back, you said 20 years. Has it ever come out that people vote it's too low?
No.
So it's
No,
always,
is-
when they vote no, it's always too high. Or
Yes.
when they vote for it, they'll say too high.
When they vote for it, it's too high, when they vote against it, it's too high. There was one time, 1996, when it took 6 referendums, and there was one vote then, it was combined town and school. There was a very strong contingent of school supporters who were pushing for a no too low. And they narrowed the margin. It did not cross into too, you know, there was not a majority, even then, there was not a majority of people who voted no too low. It was still too high. And the irony of that, that episode, I remember that very clearly. It was before I was on the Board of Ed, but the budget started out here. It was defeated very narrowly by just a few votes. There was a deep drop from the Board of Finance. That activated the school supporters who started a no too low campaign. The third vote went down a little bit more. Then there were 2 more referendums kind of in that range. And then ultimately it passed the number 6 and it went back up to what the first number was in the first place.
It costs the town $50,000 in referendums.
Yeah, it did.
okay, but what about, but the school side, right, they got because that advisory question was in there, they got to use that tool and try to express their opinion on what they thought about the budget. So it goes both ways. So it didn't work for them, but they obviously thought it was an important tool on the ballot, and they tried to say too low. So it goes both ways.
Well,
That was an instant-
I'm not sure I agree on that because again.
If they thought it was a tool, and they're gonna say, listen to me, we're gonna take the approach, vote no too low, they think that there's some substance to the advisory question, and they went with it and said, hey, vote no, too low, and they just lost the advisory question, they helped the no, too high people.
Well,
But at the end of the day, they ended up with the same budget that had everybody just voted yes.
Well,
too
no, I just
low.
mean that
Yeah.
a budget failed.
you know what, we probably have to go out for
Yeah.
a beer to talk about that
Yeah.
because it's an interesting topic.
Mhm.
The fact that that was there might have enticed them into organizing a
Yeah.
kind of a failed campaign. If that advisory question wasn't even there, they might have tried talking to the Board of Finance at a public hearing or at a Board of Finance meeting. So there's one other element for me personally that I would like to see this removed. And it has nothing to do with whether or not it's confusing or useful. I'll give you a very wonky answer. I believe, my knowledge of how charters and constitutions are written is that a document like this should be as flexible as possible. It's not like an ordinance. It shouldn't encode things in that document that then become obsolete and have to be taken out. You could actually put that in an ordinance, which is a lot easier to change and adjust, you know, because that could be done with like two meetings of the Board of Selectmen and one public hearing. But to put it in a charter, you know, locks it in, and now you're not gonna change it again if ever. You're gonna live with it for 5 years before it's gonna come up again. And then you have to go through all the rigmarole, you know, arguing about tradition more than it is usefulness. So for that reason, even if it appeared someplace else in our town code, I personally don't believe it belongs in the charter. The charter is it's a guiding document that forms how town government is to operate. And that's a detail that shouldn't be encoded in there. It should be left more flexible up to the governing bodies or the voting bodies.
So
I have a
you
question.
mentioned that the selectmen can always choose to add it if they wanted.
Yep.
So my concern is, let's say we take it out, and then all of a sudden the finance board says, we don't know which direction to go with this. Let's say there's a second vote, the selectmen can actually, on their own,
Yeah.
put that in.
That's
Because
right.
nothing prohibits that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just one more question. You alluded to something I know that came up at the time that we were voting, and they had the turf field and the fire truck and all that. If that comes out, does that mean, if the advisory question comes out, does that mean they have more space to put those other things
Individual
separate? Because I
items.
felt that if that had been separated, they would have voted for the fire truck. I really felt.
I
They
believe,
would have had a fire truck.
I believe that's true. I
The registrars
totally agree with you.
Always say there's not enough room.
Pardon?
No,
Sorry.
they were, Tim Biebel was in here, and I asked him directly, is this brought up because there's no room on the ballot? And he said, absolutely not, there's room on the ballot.
Well, I heard
No,
saying
that-
that there's not room.
There
on the
was
ballot.
not room on that ballot. I'm gonna disagree with him on that. I went over it in great detail with Lisa Burr.
So is there a limit by law on how big the ballot is
No,
or
no,
something?
no, well, actually, I don't know if there's a
I think it's
limit by law, but
the
there's
mechanical
a
function.
size that's approved by the state.
Okay.
And you can turn it over. I mean, you know, in fairness,
Yeah.
if you run out of space, you can turn it over and use the back, but all you have to do is talk to the registrars and
Yeah, they
the
don't
town
turn it
clerk
over.
and notice the drop-off in number of people that bother to even vote on page 2. It's not it's not a good representation. So in that particular case, where there was a fire truck in a turf field, I went round and around with Lisa and with the registrars, trying to see if we could fit all those questions on and squeeze them in. In that particular case, it was not possible to do it. There was a very high chance of failure in the reader if they were squished too close together. So that's another reason why I'm saying, if they're not providing good enough guidance to the majority of boards of selectmen or boards of finance over the years, the space is better used, giving the voters a chance to voice their opinion on something else,
Okay.
so.
All right, so does anybody want to make a motion, or should we just table this and we'll have to set up another meeting?
I'm gonna move that we remove it, totally, the advisory question from the requirements in the charter, going forward.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Is to remove it total.
Yeah,
Totally.
remove it. All right, hearing no discussion, we'll move it to a vote. All in favor of removing the non-binding advisory question from the charter, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Oh, wait, can you
Oop,
raise your
So
hand?
raise hands.
Okay.
Opposed?
Opposed?
All right, number 2. Revise, include the mechanism of review by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education for oversight. Number 1, use of purchasing cooperatives.
Mr.
You
Chair-
want to just give us a little background?
Yeah, this is more of a technical thing. The town attorney advised the Board of Selectmen the night we reviewed this, that even if a cooperative is to be used, at some point, early in the process, there should be a mechanism by which the Board of Selectmen approves the, the purchasing cooperative. In other words, yes, you can use this cooperative for the fiscal
author
year.
it, okay.
Yeah, it's like an insertion of language, and I'm sure Nick can work out
Mhm.
something, the other Nick.
Okay.
Um,
Any questions for the first selectman on that?
So approval by both the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, presuming it's a co-op.
Yeah.
purchase
Yeah.
for the Board of
So it'd be
Education.
like of previously approved
Yeah,
purchasing co-ops by
yeah,
the Board of Selectmen.
yep,
It would be
Yes.
and or, wouldn't it?
and what?
It would be and or.
Yeah,
So
I'm just-
I watched the discussion, maybe just because I'll draft it in the
Yeah.
language, maybe we could get some clarification. If a department wants to use a purchasing cooperative, they come and ask to the Board of Selectmen first,
yeah,
get
Before?
approval,
yeah,
and then, because that's what the selectmen were saying at the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what, so you can't just go enroll in any purchasing cooperative without some vetting. You want
Yeah, it has to
multiple
be-
sets of eyes on
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But is this
Which
per
we're due-
purchase? Sorry, is this per purchase? For every time somebody
No,
No.
per purchasing
Just-
cooperative. Yeah,
For
if you have to be a
cooperative
membership
for
or
that,
AFE.
okay.
It's like, you know, state bids are, they're kind of easy, we can always do that, there's a way that you can waive the bidding process. But like, there's this one, the last fire truck we bought for, South Street, we used this thing called the Houston Galveston Purchasing Cooperative, which is actually recognized by the state of Connecticut GAS office. Or it's not GAS, that's federal, but whatever that is, the DAS, Department of Administrative Services. So they would come to us and say, you know, we want to use this buying cooperative, we would approve it, and then they could continue to use that buying cooperative for anything that's on the list that's pre-approved through the state.
Okay.
Wouldn't have to go through that approval process every time, but it does give the boards the ability to vet them before they say, okay, you know, go ahead.
If they reach out to a cooperative, do they have to use them? Let's say they get prices back and,
No,
so it's almost like one bid with other bids.
that's correct. They can still use the competitive bidding process and see if it gets below it. And the selectmen could still say, even though this is an approved vendor, we still want you to use the bidding process. You know, if there's reason to believe that the prices are so close that we're not sure that it's cheaper to use a cooperative.
And Ms. Yansky said it's a benefit as well because it gives somebody who's more familiar with purchasing unique items,
Yeah,
you know, then oversight, and she doesn't have to develop RFPs for theater seats that we're gonna replace every 50 years.
Yeah.
Because she's not a theater seat expert.
right.
So the approval is the purchasing cooperative itself, or the purchase by that particular purchasing
No,
cooperative?
the cooperative itself.
So once you've approved a cooperative and there's a list, a vendor-approved list, you don't have to go through that again? Or,
You could say this is good for the fiscal year, and then that approval expires. But the Board of Selectmen just wanted to have the ability to vet that.
and I'm just trying to, just understand, so, or would it be per purchase?
The approval from
Because
the
I think
selectmen?
I think right now there is, at least I think the Board of Ed has been going for approval for each purchase now. Not that there have been that many, I think that they had been.
Realistically, you're not sending out your nickel and dime stuff to a
Right.
Yeah.
purchasing cooperative. I mean, it's gonna be more
Mhm.
higher ticket items, right?
Yeah,
Right, they don't come across your desk all the time, that's right. I'm just not sure whether this is the vendor that's being approved or the purchase through that particular vendor. And again, it's not that it's every day that these things come up, but it just, I guess for clarification
And
purposes.
Is this like an ethics concern as well, that some employee
I'm just not
doesn't
clear.
push up
No,
a purchasing cooperative that they may have a tie to that,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
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 I mean, it might be
Mhm.
as simple as upon approval by the Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, purchasing cooperatives may be used in lieu of the competitive bidding process. Something like that, you know, just a insertion of a clause in that sentence.
Does that add clarification for you, Nick?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to work something up and get the language to you guys,
Okay.
if you decide to go that way.
So I'll make a motion to send this on with Attorney Vitti, to add some clarification to the revision we put in, to finalize at our next.
Yeah, I don't think you need a motion for that, but I think you should probably take a consensus and then, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the motion would be, so just take a consensus that everybody is in agreement with doing a revision for this.
Mhm. Does everybody think that makes sense, just so
Yes.
we don't hamstring?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
And then reference number 6, reference to newspaper publication back to the Charter Revision Commission for clarification.
This one is, I'm not gonna be able to give you very much help on this.
Okay.
I think I got what.
Well,
what
did you
Marty
watch
said.
the,
I
did you watch the video?
did.
So basically what Marty was saying is, there's all kinds of, there's legal notice requirements, general publication requirements,
Mhm.
and they're embedded in different parts of state statute. So his concern was that this was so broadly worded, it could actually create more problems than we already have.
But we thought we were
I think
making
he's-
it broad because it was gonna help
I think
insert.
he's-
Well, yeah.
I think he's confusing the intent of what we're doing, actually.
Okay,
Um,
I'll leave that up to you guys.
Because, I mean, I watched what Marty said. I think he's thinking that the insertion of this language is gonna then make interpretation about what could be publication in a of general circulation. I don't think it's the intention of this commission to take away the publication as it is today.
No.
It's in a newspaper, because it was council's thought that the penny saver would not qualify.
Yeah.
Right.
So what we were trying to do, and maybe we can sharpen up the language a little bit, is the same as not lock us into something for 5 years.
Right.
Right.
I personally would love to see the legislature attack the publication requirement, because it's silly. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is.
It's so 19th century.
Yeah, and if they do,
It's like that advisory question.
if they do make some other medium possible, like online of some
Yeah.
sort, or something along those lines, then our charter is at least set up to accommodate that when the state statute
We
is.
You're
we
just
were
trying
gonna
to be
catch
flexible.
catch up, right?
So we're not looking to say, and it would probably fall on town council's lap to interpret what a medium consistent with the Connecticut general statutes is, but I don't think we're looking to change the publication
Mhm.
requirements in any way.
The one thing that I was concerned about watching the selectmen meeting and the public hearing, it was mentioned that we would no longer use the newspaper. That's not my intent. People,
Oh, no.
people still
No.
use the newspaper,
Yeah.
but in addition to.
And
Other options, right.
Okay.
I've said on the
It says
record
that
that
way.
if
Right,
you went
okay.
that way, I think you're inconsistent with Connecticut general statutes.
Mhm.
The statutes have not caught up yet.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
at
that's
some
the
point in
issue.
time,
You
the
have to
hope
put it in.
is that
Right.
they do, and then
Absolutely.
the charter can accommodate it.
My hope is that we can find a way to, like when we publish this, it's gonna be a insertion in the newspaper this long. I would like to be able to post a summary and then say, please, see see the full text online or in the town clerk's office or in the library where it's available to the public. But you don't have to, publish the entire verse. It's the same thing with long ordinances. You have to publish the whole thing in a paper. And very few people, I personally think it's a shame that newspapers are not more popular.
Yep.
For people staying up on local issues, I think they're important, and I do like to support journalism, like real writers and real reporters. But, we do have to reach people any way we can.
I mean, I don't think there's a major publication in Connecticut that's not behind a digital paywall now, so they're
Yeah.
even changing their business model.
Right.
So, from what we've heard from the state legislatures, it seems like there is some movement in that direction. And I'm sure the fact that it's not gonna impact a major revenue source for publications makes it a much more tenable.
Yeah.
The only thing I thought of, because I was thinking about this, because if Marty was confused by the language, would another reader be? If you put in other papers or another medium, so we said consistent with the requirements of the Connecticut general statutes, we could add or another medium consistent as revised, like we could point to the fact that the statute will be revised and then the consistency is there. So it doesn't look as if we're trying to say another medium other than the newspaper would be okay here. I don't know.
As a statute may be advised going forward, something like that.
Yeah, something that pinpoints it's a revision that needs to happen in
Right.
order for us to do this.
Bless you.
Thank you.
So I don't know if.
So would the sheer revision put us in compliance with doing that? you know?
Yes, it would. It would.
Doesn't seem
Nick,
like
I
it
have a
should be that
question
hard,
for you.
does it?
Right, right.
Simple
Oh,
concept.
good, we're compliant
It's
now.
so difficult,
Because,
right?
yeah, because then a charter revision down the road, we'll have to probably just go through and strike that,
Nix
right?
that.
Yeah, that piece of the sentence.
I have
Just
a
being
question
very
for you, Nick.
thorough.
Would it, okay, to Marty's point that there are slightly different requirements in different statutes depending on what the issue is.
Yeah, but they're mostly, they just speak to the same language. A
Mhm.
newspaper of general, published in a newspaper of general circulation is the most common language that's appearing in the statutes.
To the point I made earlier about keeping our document as flexible as possible,
Yeah.
would it suffice to simply say that for all notifications, the town of Bethel will follow the appropriate state statute, no matter what that is? That way, if they revise it,
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we're trying
Yeah, that's really what
to
what
do.
we're trying to do.
That's why we washed it down, because we wanted,
Yeah.
we didn't want to
Yeah.
have to wait 5 years to be able to change the rule after the statute changed, you know?
okay.
That, I mean, that's where we were headed, that was our intent,
Yeah.
or my interpretation of our intent.
Mine too, but
Yeah, I think there's a word or two there maybe that just could be moved around. I think it's,
Do you want to strike or another medium? Is that what's causing confusion? And just say can,
I mean, because one, like the State Department of Justice, I think, is posting their legal notices solely on their website now. They're not publishing them anymore. You know, so in practice, you know, the state isn't even following their own regulation.
yeah, that's true.
You know, so I wouldn't want to make us too encumbered if precedent is set and, you know, somebody takes them to court and the courts say, that's fine, you know, the law doesn't, it's antiquated and nobody's gonna be picking up the newspaper to see if they're arrested. You can have a cell phone in your hand.
yeah, because honestly, there's been significant case law on this topic over what is general circulation. I mean, if-
Right,
is
that's
the
what we
is the
can
news,
debate.
News Times general circulation
Yeah.
anymore? Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean,
Probably not.
you can make a good argument that it's not.
I mean, in the notice, I mean, it's like 6, 7 font maybe, like to squeeze everything in, like it's, yeah, it's not.
It's tiny.
And so you're, let me see where we're at here, so you're just gonna do something to make it say that we're gonna, you know, as per, somehow makes it flexible enough that the state changes any regulations, that we will assume that we will adhere with all those regulations, or?
Well, I think what we have now allows for that.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys have any suggestion on tightening up the language or making it more broad. I don't know. I watched Marty be unclear about it, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I remember that we were trying to make it as broad as possible,
Yeah.
yeah,
so
and that's,
I would almost make a motion that we keep the recommendation of the charter revision as is.
Second.
any discussion?
well, I think if it was confusing, we should revisit the language.
Oh, I'm sorry, do you think that, Melanie?
I do.
I thought it was just a word or two that,
I think it is.
and
I
it's
think
gonna,
a
but it's
word or
gonna
two.
make it a little more restrictive.
But I think we should keep, I think what we wanna do, we wanna do. But I think that we just need to make it a little bit more clear maybe, so that, you know.
All right, so I'll pull my motion back. I didn't know that we had real creative words that would keep it as broad as we want, but tighten it up a little bit. So
I think we
I'm
can
willing to
find
pull back a
something.
motion and almost take, since we're gonna have another meeting, almost take a consensus on maybe we work on that verbiage a little bit.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
I think it's a good thing to have in there.
Yep.
Because
Yeah, and do you
I think
wanna
we may be happy to have it in
Just
there.
put together some things
Yeah.
based on Marty's concerns and
Yeah.
understanding our intent, like,
And honestly, if any of the commission, because nothing's coming to me off the
Yeah.
top of my head right now, if anybody has any ideas,
Mhm.
just shoot them to me.
Can you check with Mr. Lawler?
I can, yeah, I can probably explain to him what our
Mhm.
intent is, and then we can discuss.
Because I listened to him and he lost me during that whole conversation, so.
So maybe we
I'll be honest
schedule
with
2
you.
meetings.
but, and he's
We'll
doing his
schedule
job
2
on behalf of the
meetings.
town, and he's
Yeah,
being.
but if he doesn't understand
cautious.
it, it's like, okay.
Yeah. But our challenge is we're trying to predict a change, we don't know what that change is gonna be, in keeping the flexibility within the charter to be able to pivot whichever direction that goes. So if we make it specific, you know, it could not serve the intent of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I like the
Yeah,
language.
Did you write it?
I mean, it's like you said before, it'll comply with
Well,
what
I
the
mean, have
state
that, as
regulations
just
are. That's
checking with
basically-
Marty.
I'll
Let
put
him
in
know
a
the
conversation
intent.
with him, and then if you guys brainstorm as well and come up with any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts or ideas, shoot them to me by email, and, I'll get something together and.
Okay. All right, so
Good luck.
are we, they met on the 2nd, today is the 10th, so we're 8 days into the 30-day, right, Nick?
When was your recommendations? I think it was
I
the
thought it was the
4th.
it was the 4th.
The
Yes,
4th, okay.
February 4th.
Oh, yeah, I have the 4th, sorry.
So, before you get
Yeah,
to the
go
next meeting, I know it's not on here, but I know there was a lot of conversation, this whole charter revision about the 4-year term. And I know it was mentioned possibly re-voting on that tonight. Is that something
They
that?
didn't
No.
push it on?
It's not on here, it's not on the list.
Yeah.
My understanding was it didn't have to be on the list, that's why I'm asking. Because we had conversations, even if it didn't come back from the selectmen, it could be I mean, personally, I don't think the vote will be any different, but I know there was conversation, I just want to make sure that conversation is had.
Honestly, I don't believe that to be the case. I think
Okay.
Let me just check my notes. I think it would have to come back as a recommendation. And I know all the selectmen did discuss it.
Yep. And I just know that's been a huge topic, so I just want to make sure it doesn't get, and I know there was conversation that we had if it did not come back. And maybe I'm misremembering.
For a specific document.
Nick, you don't have to go crazy, I don't think the vote will be any different, but just want to make sure it was brought up.
Well, I think I think it's important that the process is fair, so
Yeah.
Right.
if that was your resolution,
That seemed to be the main topic of conversation almost every meeting, that's why.
So it's two statutory sections where the Board of Selectmen can make recommendations to commission before the commission's report is final. That must be done within 15 days after the public hearing, which has been done, and that the Board of Selectmen may confer with the commission on those recommendations. The BOS makes no recommendations, then the commission's report is final.
Yeah.
So taking that to the logical extent, I think they would need to make a recommendation for you to bring it up. But
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll double check with that before the last meeting. It's just kind of my notes on the state statutes that I
Alright.
have.
Yeah, I'm just looking through. How would next Monday work for everybody, the 17th?
That is President's Day.
Oh, okay, that's why there's nothing on my calendar.
Probably.
for some reason, it's almost spring.
Yep,
Would you be available Thursday? Just because as far as being able to meet in this room,
Mhm.
Tuesday, no, I'm sorry. Well, we could meet Tuesday. We have,
other committee meetings?
we have a
we
Board of
have Board
Selectmen
of
meeting,
Selectmen.
so you could meet before the Board of Selectmen if you wanted to.
Yeah,
And
no,
when's that?
That would be,
7 o'clock.
we, Board of
The 18th,
Selectmen's at
February
7,
18th, yeah.
so that would be February 18th, so we could meet, could you be here at 6 next
It's
Tuesday?
kind of hard for me to get there since I teach a class at,
The 18th?
that isn't until
Mhm.
6.
Yeah, I
Okay,
could
then
next
what
Tuesday.
about if we were to do 6:30? Could you do 6:30?
Yeah, I don't think it'll take
Okay.
long.
Okay, we could do 6:30 and then we could schedule the Board of Selectmen after that.
Yeah,
Okay,
On the 18th?
on the 18th,
Oh, on the 8th, oh, next Tuesday.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so-
Would
right,
that
right,
work?
right. Yeah.
Would 6 o'clock work next Tuesday?
No,
No, okay,
So you're saying 6:30 on the 18th,
yes.
and we'll try.
Okay.
February 18th.
Is there anything, any other concerns anybody would like to address?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Adjourned.
Thank you.
6:39.